You've been living inside a construct so seamless, so total, that questioning it probably never occurred to you until this exact moment. I'm not talking about social conditioning or limiting beliefs. I'm talking about something far more fundamental, something that shapes every single experience you have, every decision you make, every outcome you encounter. I'm talking about your relationship with time itself. Right now, as you take in these words, you're experiencing time as a river, carrying you from past through present toward future. Yesterday happened and is gone. Tomorrow hasn't arrived yet. This moment is a thin slice between what was and what will be. This seems so obvious, so self-evident, that calling it a construct probably sounds absurd. But here's what I need you to understand. Time as you experience it, this linear progression from before to after, is not a fundamental property of reality. It's a perceptual framework your consciousness is generating. And the moment you detach from that framework, reality doesn't just shift slightly. It fundamentally reorganizes itself around a completely different set of operating principles. What you're about to discover will either liberate you from temporal limitations you thought were absolute, or challenge everything you believe about cause, effect, and the nature of existence itself.
I know that sounds impossible. Your entire life has been structured around time's apparent flow. You remember your past. You plan your future. You experience cause preceding effect. How could any of that be a construct rather than objective truth? But quantum physics discovered something extraordinary that mainstream culture still hasn't integrated. At the fundamental level of reality, time doesn't flow the way you experience it. Past, present, and future don't exist as separate, sequential moments. They exist simultaneously in what physicists call the block universe, where all moments are equally real and equally present. The reason you experience time as flowing is because your consciousness is moving through the block universe in a specific way, creating the illusion of sequential progression. You're like someone reading a book, experiencing one page after another as if the story is unfolding. But the entire book exists complete and whole. All pages are present simultaneously. Your reading creates the experience of narrative progression. But that progression is happening in your perception, not in the book itself. This isn't metaphor. This is the actual structure of space-time, according to our best physics. The universe you exist within contains all moments simultaneously. Your consciousness navigates through those moments in a way that creates the experience of time flowing from past to future. But here's where it gets profound. The way your consciousness navigates through space-time isn't fixed. It's not predetermined. You've been taught to navigate in one specific way, linearly, sequentially, bound by causality. But that's learned behavior, not inherent limitation. Your consciousness can detach from linear time perception and begin interfacing with the block universe directly. When that happens, when you genuinely detach from time as you've known it, reality has to reorganize itself around your new mode of perception. Because reality isn't separate from perception. Reality is what consciousness experiences when it interfaces with the quantum field according to specific perceptual frameworks. Let me show you what I mean through something that happened 18 months ago. I'd been researching temporal perception for years, trying to understand why certain people seem to operate outside normal causality, why synchronicities clustered around them, why their intentions manifested with impossible speed, why they seemed to know things before they happened. I thought maybe they were just more intuitive or sensitive. But the pattern I kept noticing was different. These people didn't experience time the way everyone else did. They talked about their lives differently. They related to past and future differently. They made decisions differently. It was subtle but consistent. So I started experimenting with my own temporal perception. Not trying to slow down or speed up my experience of time. Not practicing presence or mindfulness. Something more fundamental. I was trying to stop experiencing time as a flow, carrying me along, and start experiencing it as a landscape I could navigate freely. The technique I developed was counterintuitive. Instead of being present in the now, I practiced being present in multiple nows simultaneously. I would sit quietly and hold my awareness in this present moment, while simultaneously holding awareness in a moment from my past and a moment from my potential future, not remembering the past or imagining the future, actually being present in all three temporal locations at once. The first few weeks, nothing happened except mental exhaustion and confusion. My brain wasn't designed for simultaneous multi-temporal awareness. But I kept practicing because I'd studied enough physics to know this should be possible if all moments exist simultaneously in the block universe. Consciousness should be able to access multiple moments at once, rather than experiencing them sequentially. And then one morning during practice, something shifted. I can't describe it in normal language because normal language is built on linear time assumptions. But suddenly, I wasn't in this moment experiencing memories of past and projections of future. I was actually present in multiple temporal locations simultaneously. I could feel myself sitting in my apartment at age 43, and simultaneously feel myself sitting in a different apartment at age 27, and simultaneously feel myself in a future moment I'd never consciously imagined. The experience lasted maybe 20 seconds before my normal time perception snapped back into place, but those 20 seconds changed everything. Because in that state of multi-temporal presence, I saw something impossible. I saw that the sequence I'd always believed was fixed, where my 27-year-old self led inevitably to my 43-year-old self through specific events and choices. That sequence wasn't fixed at all. The connection between those temporal points was fluid. I could feel how different choices at 27 would have led to different versions of 43. And more impossibly, I could feel how my current consciousness at 43 was actually influencing what had happened at 27, changing the past by changing my relationship to it. This violated everything I understood about causality. Past was supposed to cause present. Present was supposed to cause future. But in that multi-temporal awareness state, I experienced causality working in all directions simultaneously. Future was influencing past. Past was influencing future. Present was reorganizing both. It wasn't linear. It was holographic. Every temporal point contained information about and influence over every other temporal point. When I came back to normal time perception, I expected the experience to fade like a dream, but something had permanently shifted. For the next 3 days, impossible things kept happening. Not magical or supernatural, just events that violated normal temporal causality. I had a conversation with someone about a problem I'd been struggling with for months, and they mentioned a solution I'd never considered. But here's what was impossible. I checked my journal afterwards and found I'd written about implementing that exact solution 3 weeks earlier. I had no memory of that journal entry. I had no memory of implementing the solution, but the evidence was there. Somehow, the future conversation had influenced the past journal entry, or the past entry had attracted the future conversation, or time was working in some completely non-linear way I couldn't comprehend from my normal temporal perception. Over those 3 days, 5 separate instances occurred where normal causality didn't seem to apply. Events that should have taken weeks happened in hours. Information I needed appeared before I knew I needed it. Problems resolved themselves through pathways that shouldn't have been possible given the timeline. And then I realized what was happening. By detaching from linear time perception, even temporarily, I disrupted my consciousness's normal navigation through the block universe. I was no longer moving through space-time in the standard sequential way. I was creating connection points between temporal locations that weren't supposed to connect according to linear progression. The universe was reorganizing itself around my new mode of temporal perception, actualizing pathways that didn't exist when I was locked into linear time experience. This wasn't manifestation through intention or attraction. This was reality restructuring itself because the observer's relationship with time had fundamentally changed. The implications are staggering. Every limitation you experience exists within the framework of linear time. You can't change your past. You don't know your future. You're trapped in sequential progression, where each moment leads inevitably to the next, based on prior causes. But these limitations aren't properties of reality. They're properties of how you're perceiving reality through the lens of linear time. Detach from that lens, and the limitations dissolve, because they were never inherent. They were perceptual. In the comments, drop one word that represents what you would do differently if you could navigate time non-linearly. Maybe it's heal, maybe it's choose, maybe it's create, maybe it's reconnect. Let that word be your intention point for exploring multi-temporal consciousness. Think about any stuck pattern in your life. Maybe it's financial struggle that's persisted for years. In linear time, that pattern has momentum. Each day of financial difficulty is caused by the previous day, which was caused by the day before that, stretching back through your history in an unbroken causal chain. You're trying to change the future by taking different actions in the present, but you're still carrying the weight of the past. All those years of struggle that supposedly led to this moment. That historical causality keeps recreating similar outcomes because you're operating within linear time, where past causes, present causes future. But from outside linear time, from multi-temporal awareness, that causal chain isn't real. Your current moment isn't caused by your past. Your current moment exists complete and whole in the block universe, connected to infinite possible pasts and infinite possible futures. The version of you struggling financially exists, but so does the version of you experiencing abundance. Both exist as real temporal locations in the block universe. Linear time perception makes you experience only one sequential path through these possibilities. But detach from linear perception, and you can navigate to different temporal locations. You can shift from the timeline where struggle continues to the timeline where abundance is already present, not by changing the future through actions taken in present, but by relocating your consciousness to a different present that's connected to a different past and future. This sounds like science fiction, but it's what quantum physics has been telling us for a century. The many worlds interpretation suggests that all possible versions of events exist simultaneously in superposition. You experiencing one sequential timeline is just your consciousness taking one specific path through infinite simultaneous possibilities. But consciousness isn't locked into that path. The path is being generated by your perceptual framework, specifically your linear time perception. Change the framework and the path changes instantly, because the path was never fixed. It was always just one way of navigating through simultaneous possibilities. Here's what actually happens when you detach from time. I'm not talking about transcending time or being present in the now. Those are still operating within time-based frameworks. I'm talking about disrupting your consciousness's habitual linear navigation through space-time and beginning to interface with the block universe's simultaneous nature directly. The first thing you notice is that causality becomes fluid. Events that should have happened in specific sequence start occurring out of order. You think about calling someone and they call you. Not because of psychic connection, but because in multi-temporal awareness, your future action of receiving their call is influencing your past moment of thinking about them. Cause and effect are operating in both directions simultaneously. The second thing you notice is that past memories start shifting, not through false memory or imagination, something more disturbing. You remember events happening differently than you remembered them yesterday. And you have evidence supporting both versions. You find old photos that show things you don't remember. You have conversations with people who recall shared experiences completely differently than you do, but both of you have concrete details that seem equally valid. This happens because your current consciousness is accessing different versions of past events that exist in the block universe. When you're locked into linear time, you access one consistent historical timeline. When you detach, you start accessing multiple versions of history that all exist simultaneously. The third thing you notice is that future planning becomes impossible and unnecessary. Planning requires assuming that future is separate from present, and that you'll arrive there through sequential progression. But in multi-temporal awareness, future is accessible now. You don't plan for future abundance. You navigate to the temporal location where abundance is already present. You don't work toward future goals. You relocate to the present where those goals are already achieved. This isn't visualization or acting as if. This is actual navigation through space-time in a non-linear way. I know this sounds unbelievable. Your experience has always been that past is fixed, future is uncertain, and present is the only moment you can actually inhabit. But that experience is generated by linear time perception. It's not showing you reality as it is. It's showing you reality filtered through a very specific perceptual framework that creates the illusion of sequential flow. Every meditation tradition that talks about eternal now, every mystic who speaks of timelessness, every quantum physicist who describes the block universe, they're all pointing to the same truth. Time, as you experience it, is a construct of perception, not a feature of reality, and constructs can be disrupted. Before we go deeper, I want to invite you into something real. If you've been sensing that your relationship with time has been limiting your possibilities, if part of you is recognizing that temporal boundaries are perceptual rather than absolute, hit like if you just had a recognition, and subscribe. Stay connected to this space. Grow with us. We're not just watching content here, we're exploring the frontiers of consciousness and temporal navigation. Let's keep discovering together. The practical method for detaching from time isn't complicated, but it requires letting go of your most fundamental assumptions about how reality works. You've spent your entire life reinforcing linear time perception through how you think, remember, plan, and experience. Detaching requires systematically disrupting those reinforcement patterns. First step is recognizing that your past is not fixed. This feels wrong because you have memories, you have evidence, you have a coherent narrative about how you got here. But that narrative is being constructed in this moment. Your brain is selecting from available information to create a story that makes sense in linear terms. But the information itself isn't linear. Every moment of your past exists now, in the quantum field, as accessible data. Which data your consciousness accesses depends on your current state and expectations. Try this. Think of a specific memory from your childhood. Something mundane, not traumatic or emotionally charged. Remember it in detail. Now, instead of remembering it as something that happened to past you, experience it as something happening to present you. Not imagining or visualizing. Actually relocate your consciousness to that temporal location and experience it as now. Don't observe the memory. Be in the memory. Inhabit it completely. Your body was younger. Your environment was different. Your knowledge was limited. Be that version of you in that moment. Stay there for 60 seconds of clock time. Then, without transition, relocate to a moment from last week, not remembering it, being in it. Experience that moment as your present now. Then, jump to this current moment. Read these words as if you've just arrived here from last week. Notice how this moment feels different when you've arrived non-sequentially, rather than through linear progression. What you're doing is disrupting your consciousness's habitual linear navigation through your personal timeline. You're practicing non-sequential access to temporal locations. The more you practice this, the more your consciousness recognizes that it's not bound to linear movement through time. You can access any moment directly because all moments exist simultaneously. The second step is releasing future as a destination you're moving toward. Every time you think about tomorrow, next week, next year, you're reinforcing the perception that future is separate and unreachable, except through sequential progression. But future isn't ahead of you. Future exists now in the block universe as fully real as this moment. You're not moving toward it. You're selecting which version of it to experience based on how your consciousness is navigating through space-time. Instead of planning your future, practice accessing it. Close your eyes and feel into tomorrow, not imagining what you think will happen. actually relocating your consciousness to tomorrow and experiencing what is happening. This is completely different from visualization. Visualization is creating mental images in present moment. Accessing future is relocating consciousness to that temporal location and experiencing it directly. The sensations are different. Imagination feels generated, constructed, under your control. Actual temporal relocation feels discovered, encountered, independent of your expectations. When you genuinely access a future moment rather than imagining it, you'll know because it will contain information you didn't put there, details you didn't expect, responses from people that surprise you, events that don't match your assumptions. That's how you know you've actually relocated, rather than just fantasizing. The third step is the hardest. You must stop believing that present moment is caused by past moments. This belief is so fundamental that questioning it feels like questioning gravity. But causality from past to present is perception, not physics. In the block universe, all moments exist simultaneously. No moment causes any other moment. Causality is the story your linear time, perceiving consciousness, tells about the relationships between moments. But those relationships aren't fixed. They're fluid, contextual, dependent on how you're navigating through the temporal landscape. When you release the belief that your present is caused by your past, something extraordinary happens. Your present stops being constrained by your history. You're no longer carrying the weight of everything that supposedly led to this moment. This moment exists independently, connected to infinite possible histories, and your consciousness can select which history it's connected to. This is where reality reorganizes itself. Because the moment you detach from time, the moment your consciousness stops navigating linearly through sequential causality and starts accessing the block universe's simultaneous nature directly, the pathways available to you completely change. Outcomes that were impossible within linear time become immediate possibilities. Solutions that would have required months of sequential progress become instantly accessible. Opportunities that didn't exist in your linear timeline appear because you're now navigating through a temporal landscape where they already exist. In the comments, share one area of your life where you're ready to experiment with non-linear temporal navigation. Maybe it's health, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's finances, maybe it's creativity. Let this be your declaration that you're willing to explore consciousness operating outside linear time constraints. People describe this as reality shifting or timeline jumping, but those terms make it sound mystical. It's not mystical. It's your consciousness changing how it interfaces with space-time. When you change your navigation method, you access different locations. The locations were always there. You were just moving through space-time in a way that made them unreachable. The evidence this actually works comes from observing people who naturally operate this way. Every culture has stories about individuals who seem to operate outside normal time. The shaman who knows what happened before being told. The entrepreneur who launches products before market conditions are ready, but by the time the product arrives, conditions have aligned perfectly. The artist who creates work that feels ahead of its time. These aren't people with special gifts. These are people whose consciousness has partially detached from rigid linear time perception. They're navigating through space-time differently, accessing information and possibilities that don't exist yet in the linear timeline most people are following. You can develop this capacity deliberately. It requires approximately 90 days of consistent practice, disrupting your linear time perception before your consciousness begins naturally navigating non-linearly. The practice is simple but disorienting. Every day, spend 20 minutes in multi-temporal awareness. Hold your consciousness in 3 temporal locations simultaneously. This present moment, a moment from your past, a moment from your accessible future, not thinking about them, actually being present in all 3 at once. Your brain will resist. This mode of consciousness doesn't match its normal operating parameters. You'll feel confused, disoriented, maybe nauseous. That discomfort is your neurology adapting to process multi-temporal input. push through it. After 30 days, you'll notice small temporal anomalies, events occurring out of sequence, information arriving before you need it, causality working backwards occasionally. These aren't coincidences. These are evidence that your consciousness is beginning to navigate non-linearly. You're creating connection points between temporal locations that aren't supposed to connect in linear progression. After 60 days, the anomalies intensify. You'll have conversations where you somehow know what the other person will say before they speak. Not because you're psychic, but because your consciousness is accessing a temporal location slightly ahead in the conversation and then experiencing it sequentially. You'll make decisions that make no sense logically, but turn out perfectly because you are accessing information from outcomes that haven't manifested yet in linear time. After 90 days, if you've practiced consistently, something fundamental shifts. You stop experiencing time as a river carrying you along. You start experiencing it as an ocean you can navigate in any direction. Past becomes accessible and modifiable. Future becomes present and explorable. Cause and effect become fluid rather than fixed. You're still functioning in the world. You still show up for appointments and meet deadlines. But internally, your consciousness is no longer bound by linear temporal progression. You're operating from outside time while still interfacing with time-based reality. And from that position, reality reorganizes itself constantly around your nonlinear navigation. Outcomes that should take months happen in days. Solutions that didn't exist suddenly appear. Resources materialize through pathways that violate normal causality. The most profound shift is that you stop experiencing limitation as inherent. Every limitation exists within linear time. You don't have enough money yet. You haven't met the right person yet. You haven't developed the necessary skills yet. All these limitations assume sequential progression, where you must move through time to reach desired states. But outside linear time, those desired states already exist. They're present in the block universe as actual temporal locations. You don't have to reach them through progression. You navigate to them through consciousness relocation. The limitation isn't in reality. The limitation is in believing you can only access reality sequentially. If this message resonates with you, subscribe to stay connected and hit the bell icon to get notified. You're stepping into a space where we explore consciousness beyond temporal constraints. This isn't just a channel, it's a community of temporal navigators learning to work with the block universe. If you felt something shift while watching, you're already beginning to detach from linear time. Let's keep exploring together. People who hear this often ask, if detaching from time gives you access to all possibilities, why doesn't everyone do it? Why does anyone stay trapped in linear progression if escape is possible? The answer is that detaching from time is fundamentally destabilizing. Your entire identity, your sense of self, your understanding of who you are, all of it is built on linear temporal continuity. You're the person your past made you. You're becoming the person your future will reveal. Take away that linear continuity, and who are you? If past is fluid and future is accessible now, there's no stable self moving through time. There's just consciousness navigating through infinite possibilities, selecting which version of self to experience moment by moment. Most people can't handle that level of instability. They need fixed past and uncertain future to maintain coherent identity. Detaching from time dissolves that coherence. You become fluid, multiple, constantly shifting based on which temporal locations you're accessing. It's freedom, but it's also terrifying. You lose the story about who you are and what your life means. Those stories require linear time to exist. In multi-temporal awareness, stories dissolve because there's no single thread connecting past through present to future. There are infinite threads, infinite connections, infinite possible narratives. Which one is true? All of them, none of them. Truth becomes contextual rather than absolute. This is why most spiritual traditions that teach temporal transcendence also emphasize ego death. You can't detach from time and maintain your current sense of self. The self is a temporal construct. It requires linear continuity to exist. Disrupt time, and you disrupt self. What remains is consciousness aware of itself, navigating through infinite possibilities, not bound by any single identity or timeline. For most people, that's too much to surrender. They'd rather stay limited within linear time than face the dissolution of self that comes with temporal freedom. But you're still here, which means something in you recognizes that the limitations you're experiencing aren't inherent. They're artifacts of how you're perceiving and navigating reality. And you're ready to explore what happens when you change that navigation method, even if it means disrupting everything you've believed about time, causality, and self. Share this with someone who's been feeling trapped by their past or limited by sequential progression. You know who they are. That friend who can't seem to break free from historical patterns. That family member who's waiting for the right time to pursue their dreams. Make sure you share this video. For you, it may be just sharing, but for someone, it may be the key that unlocks temporal freedom. Someone who's ready to discover that time is navigable, not fixed, and their breakthrough will ripple across multiple timelines, affecting possibilities you can't even imagine. The question isn't whether detaching from time is possible. Quantum physics and direct experience prove it's possible. The question is whether you're willing to practice disrupting your linear time perception consistently enough that your consciousness begins naturally navigating non-linearly. Are you willing to spend 90 days deliberately confusing your sense of past, present, and future until the boundaries between them dissolve? Are you willing to experience reality reorganizing itself around your nonlinear navigation, even when it violates everything you've been taught about how reality works? If yes, start now. Stop and do the first exercise. Access a childhood memory by relocating consciousness to that moment, rather than remembering it from this moment. Actually be there. Then jump to last week. Be there. Then return here. Notice how this moment feels different when you've arrived non-sequentially. That's your first taste of consciousness operating outside linear time. That's the beginning of reality reorganizing itself around your new navigation method. Practice this daily. Expand to 3-point multi-temporal awareness. Hold past, present, and future simultaneously. Watch how causality starts becoming fluid. Watch how impossible outcomes begin manifesting. Watch how the universe rearranges itself the second you detach from time. Because time is not what you think it is, and you are not who you think you are. Your consciousness, navigating through infinite, simultaneous possibilities, temporarily convinced that sequential progression is the only path. Detach from that conviction and discover what you actually are, what reality actually is, and what becomes possible when perception shifts to match what physics has been telling us all along. Time is a construct. You are a navigator. Reality is a landscape. Navigate differently, and everything changes. Not eventually. The second you detach, the universe rearranges itself. Now,